People who got fired for the stupidest reason. What happened? Worked at Best Buy in the mid-90s when I was 16. I worked selling computers and was pretty good at it. We also sold things like memory and hard drives that were behind lock and key. Part of our job was to take the tagged inventory from the trucks and put it on the shelves. This included said memory. So I close one night, put away all the new inventory, lock it up, and hand the keys to the manager. They do their checks of our department and we leave for the night. Next day I'm scheduled. I go in and the loss prevention manager said he has me on video stealing memory. I laughed and said, "Show me the video." Well, I'm somewhat tall, red hair, and white. The video he shows me has an older, very short, white guy with a shaved head. He told me that it was me and that I was fired and only showed me the video once and immediately turned off the monitor. Being 16, I didn't know any better, said some things on my way out, like "frick you," "frick this place," and the like, and I left. Turns out the loss prevention guy and his son were stealing for years to the tune over $250,000 and the guy on the video he showed me was his son. Anytime problems popped up of missing inventory, they just fired a random person to keep the attention away from themselves. When police arrested them, their house was loaded with televisions, computers, everything from the store. TLDR. Fired for stealing when the video was of the loss prevention manager's son stealing. I was fired for accidentally showing up for a shift I was not scheduled for and then leaving when I found out I was not scheduled for said shift. That happened to me, except instead of fired I was chewed out by the manager for a solid half hour. I quit a month later for mostly different reasons, but that had something to do with it. I was driving cars for a shady dealer under the table while I was laid off from my real job. Got a call that my uncle had attempted suicide and was in a psychiatric ward in a local hospital and wouldn't talk to anybody else but me. Told boss I had to roll. He said something like, "Your job comes before family. If you leave, don't come back." I left. The next morning he called and asked me why I wasn't at work. I hung up on him. My brother had emergency gallbladder removal. I called in to tell my employer I'd need to take a couple days off to help him since our parents were out of town for something. They started cussing me out and asked what was more important, my job or family. Then the same guy tried calling the next day like nothing happened, asking why I didn't show up for my shift. Dumbass. Someone was stealing from the register. I got blamed. Turned out to be the owner's brother, who blamed it on me. I was let go just before Thanksgiving. I never got my job back, but the owner did apologize months later. I hope you applied for unemployment. I once worked for a small private school. A new supervisor was hired, and she called an after-hours meeting the Wednesday night right before Thanksgiving. One teacher didn't attend and she was fired. When the new supervisor was finally let go, I heard from the owner that they had 4 lawsuits from employees being wrongfully fired. Accepted job and notified them I would need X date off for my sister's wedding. 2 months after the start date, came back from my sister's wedding and crap hit the fan while I was gone. Not my responsibility, but my name was on some of the changes in the document. Canned that day for not being there when they needed me. Now you'll never be there when they need you. I took a job with a movie theater in high school, only accepted the job because they promised me a set schedule. Me and another co-worker worked it out where one of us was always on shift. About a month after I started, they handed me a new schedule starting at 2 p.m. I was in class until 3. Told them no. Got fired for my lack of commitment to the theater. Guy preparing to retire, who had been training me to take over his job for the past 7 months. Felt I was ready to take over completely. Boss was afraid to lose 30+ years of experience and fired me to keep the old guy for a little longer. From what I understand, there was a pretty big fight. Old guy was a wonderful reference for me with the new job I obtained, with a 20k plus pay raise, and begrudgingly agreed to stay on for another year. Old guy should have retired anyway. When my day comes to retire, I'm leaving even if I'm the only one who knows the network password. I broke my hand and got fired for asking to take a day off to go to the doctor. I never called in there once in the 5 years I worked there. 3 members of my family worked for the same employer and all 3 of us were fired when one of us broke their wrist on the job. Go to love right to work laws. Supposedly, I argued with the owner's wife about working weekends. I specifically told them I can work weekends, but cannot work anytime with less than a day's notice. I'm not at your beck and call for $8 an hour. Frick me right? I was fired for playing solitaire on my 15 minutes break when I was working as a receptionist. The doctor who owned the clinic was dumb enough to put that as the reason in my termination letter. I collected unemployment after he tried to appeal it. They explained in great detail how stupid of a reason this was for termination. Got fired from a public library for taking 2 carts to collect books from the outside drop box instead of 1. The past few times I emptied the drop box on a Monday it required 2 trips, so I brought 2 carts instead. It turns out the matter of how many carts were used in emptying the drop box was a matter of a library board vote and I was in violation of a town ordinance. Mind you, I wasn't fired. I was placed on paid administrative leave pending a library board inquiry at which I was welcome to call witnesses. I couldn't keep a straight face, so I resigned. You must live in the most boring, safe town if anyone has the time to care enough about library carts for there to be an ordinance. I brought my own box cutter to work at a temp job I had worked for 2 days already because they refused to replace the blades in their box cutters, and got fired because it looked like a knife. The schedule was hanging off the wall and it was magnetized. Everyone's names were little magnets. Someone knocked it off the wall and thought they put the magnets back in the right places. Naturally I didn't show up for my shift. I was fired the next day even after it came to light what happened because I should know what my shifts were. ETA. Thanks for the love. Reddit. This happened over 20 years ago, at a medical insurance company. I didn't sue them, mostly because I was young and just didn't know that could be a thing. I'd do it again. I wasn't looking for kudos. Someone needed help so I did what was needed. I didn't have any idea that it was against company policy. We certainly didn't cover it in my training class. Oh, and the lady didn't call her insurance company instead of 911. We were trying to solve an issue with one of her claims. I came back to her having an emergency after I'd had her on hold. I worked in a customer service call center for an insurance company. A customer called in and had a medical emergency, probably a heart attack, but I'm not sure. While I was on the phone with her, I used the phone in the empty cubicle next to me to call 911 and stayed on both lines to be sure that EMS got to her. I was fired because A. I took too long on calls already and this was exceptionally long. B. I made an unauthorized outgoing call. And C. I gave the customer's personal information, name and address, out to the 911 operator. That is absolute insanity. This is the worst one I've read in the thread by far. My wife got fired once for giving a high-level donor. She worked for an art gallery, a bottle of water at a big dinner and art auction. Her boss had insisted that there be no water at the event, but when the donor asked for water, my wife went and found some dang water. Boss found out and fired her the next day for insubordination. Hopefully she let the donor know. My father was in hospice care and his death was imminent. Asked my supervisor if I could telework for a few days so I could be with him when he passed. This was 2019 before telework became the norm. Was approved to TW but had to document what I was working on, hour by hour. Not an issue since my dad pretty much slept due to medication up until he passed. My boss and I were both fired for not clearing this with HR before proceeding, even though I had documented proof that I was doing company business for 8 hours a day while I was out. When HR means nothing more than a pack of tin-pot dictators who couldn't actually tell you what human resources management is to save their lives. My first job ever was as a dishwasher. I was so proud. I was 18. Of course, my parents didn't believe me so my mom called them and asked them if it was true. They fired me that night because they felt I was unreliable. I have yet to let my folks live that one down. My sister was dating this guy who was constantly accusing her of cheating. He would sometimes come into the restaurant she waited at to see if she was there. She got fired because he kept coming in too frequently and not getting anything. It was my second job after high school. I was 18 going on 19. I was a parts delivery driver for a local auto parts store. All the drivers had to report to a dispatcher. She would tell us where to go and what to do. Basically my supervisor. She had at least 10-12 years on me, so I was basically fresh meat in the store. After 4 months or so she started getting more comfortable with me. She would rub my shoulders, try go give me back rubs, would buy me lunch, would text me on weekends inviting for drinks. This one weekend she was being a little too persistent in texting me, so I politely told her that I was not interested. Well, come Monday morning I got fired because apparently I had not been doing my job properly. Looks like you had a case for a sexual harassment suit, and those texts would have helped. I got a middle-level position at the company where they boasted at how family-orientated they are. They are the kind of company that has a small arcade and putt-putt and ping-pong table and encourage people to relax and play them. After a month of being there I decided to play some co-workers in ping-pong since I'm pretty decent at it. The owner and his son ends up walking through the doors and sees me playing and challenges me. I play the son and absolutely demolish him. He got extremely upset and walked away after throwing the paddle at me. Later that week I was fired for not fitting the culture. Cool. When a company says family, they mean a family you won't be a part of. They have their favorites already and you are in the way. Kinda fired, I guess. Got a job offer and they wanted me to start ASAP, but told them I want to give my job at least a week's notice. Turned in a 1-week notice. Later in the day went to our scheduled breaks 5 minutes late because I was busy doing something at work that I couldn't just put down. So I came back 5 minutes late. Manager came up to me acting really mad and said I was fired for abusing breaks. I just laughed, handed him my badge and started walking to my car. He tried stopping me saying HR needed to see me to fill out paperwork. Laughed even more and got in my car and left. Took the week off to relax before starting my new job. When he said that HR needed something, say sorry, I don't work here anymore. Always fun when stupid managers try to control people that no longer care about their crap. I had pneumonia and I couldn't even talk. Lost voice. So I asked my mom to call my boss to tell her I was severely sick and couldn't come to work. She called me the next day saying I shouldn't rely on my mommy to call in for me when I'm sick and that I was fired for blowing a shift. I was a hostess at a restaurant and was in grade 10 LOL. When I was getting hired they told me I work Monday Friday only. Great. Couple months go by. Work no weekends. Plan family vacation for upcoming weekend. Leaving for vacation right after work. At 4:30 they tell me I have to work the weekend. I say I can't, I have vacation. They say it's mandatory. Go home. Decide to go on vacation anyway. Call in Saturday. Come into work on Monday. Fired. Spent the day fishing. What the actual frick? My brother worked part-time in a hardware store. In winter, the low season, the store would stop scheduling the newest employees and would start scheduling them again in spring. My brother was one of the new guys and wasn't scheduled in the winter. In the middle of spring, he went to check when he would start again. There was a new manager he didn't know and she told him he wasn't on the employee list, without a reason. Apparently they just assumed he wouldn't work again and terminated him without telling him. Since we have good labor laws, my brother got a few thousands in settlement for lost income. I got fired from Burger King because a co-worker let me use his vape on my break. When I was off break, I tried giving it back but kept getting ignored. I figured I'd give it back after we closed, but he left early. I went back the next day, my day off, to return it and got fired for stealing. This seems like it was premeditated on their part. I took a filing gig with a working interview. The filing lady was being promoted. The lady asked if I knew my alphabet. Yes, I do. Thanks. Turns out her system was crap. Hazel Fretter was filed under H and Bob Dylan was filed under D. I dared question this and I was also not as fast as her on my first day. You know, the lady with the crap system she made up and had been doing for 10 years. At first I was insulted. I've never been let go for doing a bad job before. Boy, was that a hellish control freak bullet dodged. I worked at this hotel doing afternoon evening shift and 2 overnight shifts a week. They listed the following reasons for letting me go. Claimed I was leaving property without clocking out because I wasn't on camera the entire time. The date they said specifically was an evening that I spent cleaning up the meeting space because it was slow. I was also not the only front desk person on shift. When working overnight, I would sit on a chair to do the audit from midnight to 3 AM. Sitting on a chair at the front desk was not allowed, even at midnight early morning. Also, when working overnight, I had to fold linen, so I would listen to the radio music through a Bluetooth headset while folding and cleaning up the back. That was also not allowed even at midnight early morning. They honestly probably just didn't like me, but after they fired me, I went and got a new job at the hotel next door and started making a lot more money and was able to do all the things I was let go for. I never understood jobs that insist you stand the entire shift or that won't allow music. I worked at a bar that was notorious for firing people. It was known that no one lasted for more than a month, and it was a big deal if you made it longer than that. I made it to month 3 when I was fired for not putting ketchup on a customer's table. They were eating shepherd's pie and salad respectively and didn't even ask for ketchup. Which raises the question on if they are doing that intentionally to avoid paying out benefits and if that constitutes a crime. I got fired for wearing batting gloves. I worked in a convenience store, so of course I handle cash all day long. Cash also dries the heck out of my hands for some reason, so instead of wearing latex gloves, if I have to take them off at any time, putting on a new pair sucks. I wore batting gloves. I did this for months until some customer said something, and I was told to take them off. I explained that they helped me do my job better, but the manager wouldn't listen. Went a day without them and it was maddening. Went back to wearing them and was fired a couple days later for insubordination. Ended up working at another store in the same chain with a former assistant store manager, now manager, and I never had a single complaint about my gloves the 2 years I was there. Didn't wear a tie that I was never given. I was supposed to have a black tie as part of my security uniform. They never gave me a tie and told me not to worry about it. I worked nights anyway. Then some exec did a walkthrough and saw I wasn't wearing a tie and told them to get rid of me and I was out on my butt. Sounds like some crap Allied would do. Back in the day, I had a part-time job at a convenience store. The manager was swapping out franchise branded coffee grounds for Costco coffee to save money as he got a bonus based on store profitability. I knew, but didn't care. He wasn't robbing me, and let's be realistic, Costco probably provided better coffee grounds. When he got caught and fired by the corporate owner, he phoned me up and fired me on the assumption I sold him out. I'm not sure that someone who no longer has a job could fire me, but I didn't care as I had given my notice to the assistant manager a few hours earlier that I would be quitting in a week, or earlier if they found someone. I was able to collect a 2-week severance payment instead. I got fired from a McDick's for asking too many customers how their day was going. Not because it slowed anything down. Mind you, I only did when it was slow. They put in complaints to corporate that I was being invasive. The first time I thought my manager was making a joke. I mean, not great since I'm eating this crap. How's your career going? I was given my work schedule for the week. It was changed after I received it, and I didn't show up on a day I had originally been off. Manager called and said, "You've done this too many times. You're fired." I'd never so much as been late for work. I learned later that they found a way to get rid of every single person under 18. My boss asked me to come in his office and fired me on the spot with the excellent reason of "you know why." I was pretty distressed and way too shy to protest and left with that. Learned afterwards that it was because I had a cold that day and was a bit tired. Joke on him. It's illegal to fire people on the spot in my country and I brought some well-deserved justice on him. I got grounded for you know why, and it was something that the person grounding me didn't know wasn't reality. A dream this person thought really happened. Company I used to work for fired people all the time for having nicotine in their system from random drug tests. They didn't allow smokers to work there, but by God they gave you free beer at the family outing events. It was an awful company. I was a new hire. It was Christmas time, so the office was hosting a Christmas sweater competition. I was appointed judge because I was new and thus impartial. I received explicit consent from each employee in front of the supervisor before proceeding to judge. At least one female co-worker accused me of looking at her chest while I was judging her sweatshirt. I kid you not. Fired. I got laid off because of COVID, but my supervisor and HR made sure to tell me they wanted to fire me with cause because my supervisor didn't want me working there. I wasn't one of her favorites. I had been with the company for 5 years almost to the day. I had more experience than my supervisor and knew every job in the warehouse, and I was efficient at all of them. I'm sure my supervisor fabricated issues about me and embellished the littlest things so she had a reason to get rid of me. This was not the first time she had done this, and since I've been gone over a year, there have been 5 or 6 people quit or be fired because of her, equal to almost half of the people in the warehouse total. I got fired for following the rules. In undergrad I was a tutor for the local school district. The main perk of the job was that if I needed a day off for a test or to study I could take it as long as I told my supervisor. Well, I told my supervisor, followed all the rules, and she's like, you can't call off, you're fired. Turns out when anyone else needed a day off they just didn't show, and supervisors had no way of knowing since we just walked into the schools and signed our own hours, so it looked like I was the only one that ever asked off. Didn't get fired for it, but I once got a final write-up for taking a lunch break I was contractually obligated to take. Old company I worked at had more holes in their upper management than a flour sifter. Basically I got fired for stealing an original Furby back in the day by putting it into layaway. End of my shift came. There was a special edition Furby at my register, so I said screw it and put it in layaway before they closed up. 3 days later, my next day at work, I was called into the office halfway through my shift and was accused of theft and fired. I asked them point blank, how the frick can you fire me for theft when the item is sitting in the store? They claimed I backstocked the item for myself by telling people it was on hold. Never happened. They demanded that I get it out of layaway and return it. Told them to frick off. Went to pay it off. Was payday. And walked out the store. There was a cop outside that they flagged down. Told him I stole the item and the cop asked for my receipt, which I gave to him with a huge smile on my face. Manager was still out in the parking lot talking to the cop as I drove by and flipped him off. Man, I can't believe the manager tried this crap. Unless, and possibly even if, they knew the cop personally, the cop would be rightfully really annoyed about this absolutely ridiculous waste of time. I was in college and waitressing at a restaurant that was open all night. The manager refused to make the schedule so that those of us in college would only work the all-nighters on days we didn't have class the next morning. He didn't give a crap if you had class or not, he would still give you an all-nighter. On one such schedule he gave me 2 all-nighters in a row on the days I had 8 AM classes. My shift was 11:06, so I would get home just in time to shower and go to class. So, I worked 11:06, went to class from 8:09, then 11:01, and then home to study, eat, and try to catch nap. That night back for another 11:06 shift, home to shower and go to class at 8. Had a break in class from 8 to 1 to eat and study, then had a 3-hour lab from 1:04. Went home, studied, ate, and fell asleep about 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I didn't wake up until 11:30 because I'd slept through my alarm. I called and said I was on my way and I was sorry I was late, but I'd not slept more than 6-7 hours in the last 48 and I'd overslept. Manager fired me over the phone for using lack of sleep as a reason to miss a shift, and he was tired of listening to us college kids whine about all-nighters. I had never complained once about my overnight shifts and had never been late. Not once in my 6 months of working there. I'd started in May and was fired right near Christmas. Turned out he found an excuse to fire every single college kid that worked there, and that left him with only 4 waitresses and a scramble to find new ones. However, a huge portion of the workforce was college kids and word had gotten around, so he had to settle for really old ladies who refused to work overnights and only 4 waitresses that would. Sucked to be him. When I was 14 I worked at a chip shop in my hometown. I only had the Friday night shift, but I covered pretty much every other shift people couldn't do, so ended up doing 3 or 4 extras a week too. I was also never once late. This one day I was asked to cover someone's shift later that day, which I agreed to. However, my dad actually had a pretty bad stroke not long after. I tried phoning the owner all day and got no answer. I finally managed to get hold of him 20 minutes before my shift, explaining that I couldn't come in as my dad was in hospital and may die. He fired me on the spot, as apparently I wasn't reliable. My dad didn't die, although was left permanently disabled. but the chip shop actually went out of business not long after, so silver linings and all that. I got fired from a bar I had worked at for 4 years by the owner, who almost never showed up but had never had a problem with me before and no customer complaints. The reason? I was told I acted like I was in charge and I was telling people what to do. I was the security manager. I'm guessing it was the $4 more an hour I was making than anyone else. Mayo, the brains in some people scare me. They changed my schedule on Christmas Eve after I left and never told me. I got a call at 8:30 AM on the 26th asking where I was. I told them it was my scheduled day off. That's when I was informed that my schedule changed. The managers have to get you to initial next to a schedule change so people can't say they didn't know. I asked if my initial was there and it wasn't there. There also wasn't any phone call to me, so further proof that no one informed me of the change. They demanded I come in. I refused because I was with family about an hour away. They fired me for being a no-show. I hated the job, so I didn't really care. I was in a PR job that I was completely underqualified for. It was supposed to be an entry-level admin role, but she had me managing accounts, campaigns, etc. I explained to my boss multiple times I did not have the experience. I felt completely out of my depth, and every time I got something wrong she went nuts at me. I finally had enough and told her I needed more help. She said she couldn't help me and then fired me. Sounds like they wanted to force you to sink or swim and quickly learn how to do a much more high-paying job so that they wouldn't have to pay someone with the qualifications to do it. I started a new job based on the knowledge and transferable skills I had from a previous job. On my first day in the new office, another one of the new-ish employees gave me the ominous warning. I don't think you know what you got yourself into. My boss had inherited the department and knew nothing about what we did, and couldn't log into the system without help. She said my co-workers who had been there 20 years would train me. Those co-workers refused to train me because they aren't my boss and said to just figure it out as I went along, but then refused to let me work on any projects with them. Then they complained to my boss that I didn't know what I was doing, so I was fired. Sounds like a bunch of people had jobs where they did nothing and got paid well to do nothing and felt threatened that the whole thing might be cracked open if they were made to train a new employee on their non-job. Small software company. I was interviewed by the president and the VP, who happened to be his girlfriend. He thought she was working too hard. She didn't want to give up any authority. I was hired as office manager. She didn't communicate with me at all about what I was supposed to do. 2 weeks later he called me into his office. She was there and said I wasn't doing anything useful and walked me out of the building. This is the one of those absolutely ridiculous reasons that makes sense. To him you probably were pretty useless, but it's not your fault, lol. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.